Our speaker this afternoon is the one and only Con Marshall. And he typically doesn't need an introduction in Dawes County. I'm not sure he needs one in the Panhandle or maybe the state of Nebraska. But that's because he's written countless news and sports articles about the college, its alumni, and the Chadron Record. His numerous photos have appeared in every town's newspaper in Nebraska, Colorado, South Dakota, and Wyoming. In these parts, it seems as if everyone knows him, when in actuality, he truly knows everybody. And those people's parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, well, you get the point. Yes, Con truly is an institution at Chadron State College. He has been a valuable historian for the college and region, and his encyclopedic knowledge of Chadron State has proven fruitful. He's authored 2 books on the college and is a valuable resource for anyone looking for information about Chadron or the college. He's worked for Chadron State College in various capacities for more than 40 years. He even sat where you are sitting now when he earned his bachelor's degree from Chadron State back in 1963. I'm not sure who was speaking that day, but I'll bet Con remembers. He recently was honored with the college's Distinguished Service Award in October. Before that, he was elected to several halls of fame, including the Rocky Mountain Athletic Conference Hall of Fame this summer. He's also a former Chadron Record Citizen of the Year and was presented with the college's Distinguished Alumni Award in 2012. I have to be honest, class isn't over yet. Knowing Con, I'm sure he has plenty of information in his remarks, and I'm confident he's willing to share it all with you. I understand that his wife of many, many years, Peg, helped him edit this last night, though, so you might be in luck. Now it is my privilege to introduce Mr. CSC himself, Con Marshall, as today's speaker. Con?
Better get it right side up, I guess. Here. Well, I'm really glad to be with you this afternoon. This is supposed to be the happiest day on campus, you know. It's graduation, and you've reached the goal of completing college. Congratulations. This is one of the highlights of your life, and I hope you'll enjoy it. I want to do my part to make it a happy time. I suppose one way I could do that is just to stop right now and say congratulations and go sit down. When one of our sons heard that I was to be had asked to be the commencement speaker, he told me to remember, nobody ever complained about the graduation speech being too short. There's also the story about the 4th grader that wrote an essay about Socrates. He said, Socrates was a philosopher. Socrates went around giving advice, and they poisoned him. With that in mind, I don't have too much advice in my talk. It's mostly filled with happy success stories of people who have attended Chadron State, just like you have. Those I will talk about were probably an awful lot like you when they came to Chadron State. They weren't born with a silver spoon in their mouth. They probably didn't have 30 ACT scores when they arrived at CSC, but they wanted to learn. They were taught by a dedicated faculty just like we have today, and they went on and they succeeded very, very well. I wanted to tell you a lot more success stories than I'm going to be able to do tonight. A couple of days ago, my wife, Peggy, insisted that I bring home my script and we'd go over it, and she'd time me on it. It was over 30 minutes long. So ever since then, I have been whittling on it and cutting it down. I had way more good things to tell you than it's going to take, but it took me 2 days to get it acceptable, and so here we go. Since I've worked so hard for it and traveled so far here, and they paid me so much to come and do this speech, I'm going to go ahead and speak for a few moments. I'll try to hurry, and you're just lucky that I practiced it a few days ago. I can't begin to tell you how happy I am to be giving this speech. About 4 years ago, when word leaked out that Chadron State College was planning to expand and remodel and expand the Armstrong building, I said I would never live long enough to ever see that happen. After all, I was on campus in 1970s when Chadron State began planning for the Nelson Activity Center, just at the other end of the football field. After numerous delays, several economic declines and the delays that just took place, and the governor's veto of the bill initially that had to be overridden, it was 16 years before that building finally opened. After that experience, I figured I would be at least 85 by the time this building got opened if it followed the same trend. That's why I was really nervous when they began constructing it in April of 2013. I was worried because I said I would probably never live long enough to see it open. I even tried to convince my wife that maybe I should get a nurse to follow me around and take my pulse once in a while and check me out and make sure I wasn't almost ready to go, you know. But here we are tonight. The Eagles have played several basketball games here in this facility, and we won too, didn't we, Leslie? Anyway, good job. And everyone seems to agree that this is a tremendous addition to the college. It's a tremendous addition for Western Nebraska and for the entire region. I want to congratulate the college's administration, and and the Board of Trustees, and commend the entire state college system for seeing that this building is so well designed and is so well made and just was opened so rapidly. Good job. We also need to commend the Chadron State Foundation for their leadership in working so hard to raise the college's share, some $3 million to make it possible. That leadership includes Executive Director Connie Rasmussen and her staff, and the co-chairman of the fundraising drive, Randy and Lori Bauer, and Chad and Cheryl Emanuel. They put in a lot of extra time and effort to make it all come together. So did Brad Smith, the college's athletic director at the time. A great deal of thanks must also go to CSE graduate and State Senator John Harms, who introduced the $6.7 million appropriations bill and helped steer it through the legislature so this building became a reality. I'm going to say more about John later. So you graduates, I hope you never forget that you're the first class to receive your degrees in this building, the Chicoine Center. You're helping make history. This is a special time at Chadron State College. Congratulations on being that number in that first group. One of my charges tonight was to tell you a bit about Ross Armstrong, the person for whom the old gymnasium across just next door here is named, and Vern Chicoine, the person for whom this building is named. I had the pleasure to know both of them pretty well. When Ross Armstrong and his wife Ruby arrived one day before the 1933-34 school year was to begin, they planned to stay just 2 years. Then they would move on to a bigger and better place, you know. But they came to love it here in a hurry. They stayed and they lived here for more than 50 years until their deaths. Over the years, Ross became known as Mr. Chadron State. People knew him from far and far wide. He had a special personality, and he would have made a great news reporter. I know he would have been. That's my profession, you know. Everybody wanted him to hear their stories. Day after day, people would stop at his office and tell him what they had done, what they had seen, or what they had heard. It was amazing how many people stopped to see him and talk to him, whispered to him oftentimes, because this was kind of top secret stuff. Ross was widely respected. He was a tremendous coach. For many years, he coached all three of the sports on the campus: football, basketball, and track and field. He knew how to deal with people very well, and I've got at least one example of that. When he was the coach of the 48 and 49 teams that won the Nebraska College Conference, he had an all-star running back. Jack was his name. One of his teammates told me he was as good as Johnny Rodgers. Now, you probably may not know who Johnny Rodgers was, but he was good enough at Nebraska to win the Heisman Trophy. Anyway, they were going to have a blocking drill, and Jack came to Mr. Armstrong, Coach Armstrong, and he said, you know, Coach, I'm probably going to be carrying the ball most of the time, and I probably don't need to know how to block. I don't need to go through this blocking drill. And he said, oh, Jack, that's right. I tell you what, why don't you go over on the track and just start running, and I'll let you know when I think it's time for you to come and join us again. Well, about an hour later, the whistle blew, and Jack, you can come on over now. So Jack got to run a whole lot and practice his running. 4 of Ross's ex-players named sons after him: Ross Alcorn, Ross Burden, Ross Dirks, and Ross Stevenson. They thought so much of their coach. He was the NAIA District 11, which includes all the small colleges in Nebraska's chairman for 11 years. And he served 11 years as the chairman of the Nebraska Elk Scholarship Program. That's for the whole state. He was inducted into the NAIA Hall of Fame in 1965. Later that year, the college's new gymnasium was named after him. He was one of the very, very few people who were still employed by the college, a college on the state college campuses, when a building was named in his honor. He was also the first person to be associated with Chadron State to be inducted into the Nebraska Football Hall of Fame. And he was the founder of the Chadron State College Athletic Hall of Fame. He was still working for the college when he died suddenly of a heart attack in January of 1990, when he was almost 85 years old. And that was more than 55 years after he had arrived at Chadron State College. I think he kind of liked the place. Now about Vern Chicoine. He was one of the terrific friends of Chadron State College that it has had through the years. He lived in Chadron for 65 years prior to his death on February 9, 2003, at age 89. He was a businessman, he was a rancher, and he was an investor. He was president of the Chadron Chamber of Commerce and was the mayor of the city. He was a thinker. He was one who never did anything by the seat of his pants, as they say. He studied every move before he made it. Vern never attended Chadron State, and he was never employed by the college, but he said the college gave him thousands of hours of entertainment and enjoyment, and he became the college's largest donor. I got to know him much better than I ever had before when he married my Aunt Frances in the early 1970s after both had lost their spouses. They had a great relationship. They traveled widely, and he took her to several poetry conventions where she read her work and often received awards. After they'd been married for about 20 years, Frances began experiencing heart problems, and she knew her time on earth was limited. She even advised Vern to who he should marry next, a lady in their church. He followed her advice and married Madge Fortune, and he soon planned and built a new home for Madge. He gave that home to Chadron State, and that's where Dr. Ryan and his wife, Ann, now live. It's pretty nice, isn't it? Yes, Vern was extremely successful and extremely generous. Besides the home his more than $3 million worth of contributions to the college included funding for the press box at Elliott Field, the atrium for the Sandoz Center, the statue of Thomas Jefferson that's in that center, and the establishment of several scholarships. Chadron State owes a lot to Vern Chicoine, and that's why this gymnasium, this building, is named in his honor. By the way, graduates, when Vern graduated from Valentine High School in the early 1930s, his first job paid $1 a day. So if some of you don't have too big of paychecks when you start your jobs, better days are undoubtedly ahead. During this commencement, I also want to tell some other success stories about CSC graduates who I've had the pleasure of interviewing and knowing. I hope that they will serve as an inspiration to you. These individuals came from Chadron as probably pretty common folks. They probably had no idea where they were headed after graduation. but they were given the tools and the inspiration to do some pretty spectacular things. I'm confident that someday many of you will have similar stories to tell, and similar spectacular success stories. It'll be interesting to watch that. I'm going to initially turn the spotlight on the Buckingham family. That dates back to the pioneer days. It shows how much young people valued education years and years ago, and how Chadron State became the springboard for countless very successful lives. Walter and Georgia Buckingham and their family, their growing family, arrived at a homestead near Morrill in 1905 in a covered wagon. Their first home was a two-room tar paper shack. The family kept growing, and it eventually included 11 kids. 9 of those children attended Chadron State or Chadron Prep, which was the high school portion of the college at that time. Initially, Walter Buckingham said there was no way that his family could ever, any of his children could ever attend college. They just couldn't afford it, even though Chadron State was not charging any tuition at that time. However, when the second oldest daughter, Mabel, persisted, he decided that the family could raise 5 acres of cucumbers. The boys and everybody could work together and do the weeding and the hoeing and everything it took. They'd make pickles out of the cucumbers and they'd sell the pickles. Well, it worked, and Mabel came to Chadron State. I never knew 3 of the boys that came to Chadron State also, but I had the pleasure of interviewing both Earl and Harold. Earl kind of had it made when he came to CSC, known as Big Buck. He received a football scholarship that allowed him to the privilege of sleeping in the old Miller Building's gymnasium and a janitor's job that paid 25 cents an hour. He also drove a taxi cab in Chadron, joined a high school friend in opening a filling station, and bought a bus that carried the Chadron State football team to their games when he was still a player. Pretty soon you'll see that the Buckinghams were pretty enterprising folks. Incidentally, Earl was a member of the 1925 Chadron State football team that defeated the University of Colorado. When Harold arrived at Chadron State in 1928, he'd already saved up $500 because he'd crawled 156 miles that summer while hoeing sugar beets. He had even convinced the Morrill School Board to cut Christmas vacation short by a week so he could go to work in the fields a week early. How many of you have tried that? You suggested the principal or the superintendent would maybe cut Christmas vacation kind of short. Once he got to Chadron, he rigged up a truck and delivered kerosene to the homes in Chadron. One of his customers was Ella Eckhart, who he married. When Harold and Earl graduated from Chadron State, the Great Depression was in full swing. Both had teaching degrees, but there were no teaching jobs. Thus, they bought a truck and hauled the first produce from Denver to the new Safeway store in Chadron. They later got the first trucking permit from Denver to Los Angeles. Eventually, the family was involved in more than 50 partnerships, and Buckingham Freight Lines, which they built, had more than 1,300 employees in 29 states during its heyday. All the Buckingham boys became millionaires. Their father probably never earned, Harold told me, probably never earned more than $130 a month in his life. But all the boys became millionaires, and that was way before it became common for people to become millionaires. CSC also played another role in the story because 4 of the 5 boys married girls from Chadron State, and a couple of girls married boys that graduated from Chadron State. My second story is about Gretchen Glody Berggren. I have often called her the most significant person to ever grow up in Chadron. She has a really remarkable story. She's now retired and lives in Golden, Colorado. She was the first female pre-med student at Chadron State College. She also was the only woman in her class when she graduated from the University of Nebraska Medical Center as a physician in 1958. While she was in med school, she met her husband, Dr. Warren Berggren. They were married in Belgium, where they had gone for more training before they became medical missionaries in the Belgian Congo. They eventually were forced to leave the Congo, but not before they had trained many natives to care for themselves. After that, the Bergwins joined the Harvard School of Public Health. Now, that doesn't mean they had comfy jobs in Boston. One aspect of their work included supervising more than 100 Harvard medical students at the Albert Switzer Hospital in Haiti. Dr. Gretchen became best known for the nutritional programs that she developed. She noted that in the developing countries where she had worked, the 3 M's, measles, malaria, and malnutrition, had to be conquered before you could teach the 3 R's. Gretchen eventually designed Save the Children's program that it operated in 26 developing countries. The programs taught women how to better utilize locally available food. She also trained birth attendants in home deliveries and introduced family planning, called child spacing, in Africa. In 1992, Gretchen was selected as one of 6 children health champions by the United Nations Children's Fund and was honored at the White House for her lifelong contributions of helping with the health of children in Haiti. She also received the highest award given by the Harvard School of Public Health, and both the Distinguished Service Award and an honorary doctorate from Chadron State. She was always appreciative of the training she received at Chadron State. She noted that the interest and input she received from the dedicated science faculty at CSC was really, really helpful. She called it second to none. And she said, here in a small campus in northwest Nebraska, we studied the world. Another exceptional story belongs to Gene Hughes. He graduated from Chadron State in 1956 and was named the outstanding senior majoring in mathematics at Ivy Day that year. He went to Kansas State to work on his master's degree, but before he got that degree done, they called him back to Chadron State. Their math enrollment was up and they needed another teacher at CSC. He came back, but before long, the original math teacher resigned and Gene Hughes became the chairman of the math department at Chadron State before he was 25 years old. The word quickly spread that he was a tremendous teacher, and just 3 years later, Chadron State had more math majors than the other 3 state colleges combined. After earning his doctorate, Hughes came back to Chadron State and became Dean of Administration. He was finally lured away from this college by Northern Arizona University, where he spent 23 years, including 14 years as the president, and saw the enrollment grow by more than 50%. He later became the president of Wichita State University when that school was struggling, and in 5 years he led it to a great revival. He was named Kansas' Citizen of the Year by the State Society for Professional Engineers. Both universities where he was president named buildings after him. In the fall of 2010, just a few years ago, Dr. Hughes and his former CSC math students had a reunion here on campus. Those who returned had great success stories of their own to tell. Some of those are the ones I took out of this speech tonight. The reason they did so well is because while he was their teacher, he had foreseen the computer boom that was about to develop and had given as much information as he could find to them, and they studied it as much as they could. It paid off when the boom began in the late 1960s and 70s. In 2003, when Dr. Hughes was conferred an honorary doctorate at Chadron State, during his commencement address, he called Chadron State a college of opportunity and provided much information about the students that he had been teaching. I definitely believe that Chadron State is still a great college of opportunity. It's a place where students are encouraged, they gain confidence in their skills, and can go on and have very productive and rewarding careers. The final person I will spotlight is John Harms. I mentioned to you a while ago that I would say some things about him. He was a state senator who introduced the bill that helped make this facility possible. John came to Chadron State in 1958 after graduating from Morrill High School. Following his freshman year, he said he wasn't coming back to college. His family was poor and he didn't think he could afford to come back. But Mr. Armstrong, Ross Armstrong, another person I talked to you about before, then the Dean of Men, and the person for whom that gymnasium is named, went to John's home and persuaded his folks that John should return to Chadron State. So he did. He was extremely popular on campus. He was the president of his class 3 years, was a student senate president as a senior, and he set the CSC school shot put record. John earned his master's degree from Chadron State and went on to become an educator, as we know. He was president of Western Nebraska Community College in Scotts Bluff for 30 years. The spectacular Harms Center at WNCC is named for him. And while he was president there, Western Nebraska Community College and Chadron State College formalized several agreements that helped students obtain bachelor's degrees much sooner than they would have otherwise. John is now wrapping up 8 years as a senator in the Nebraska legislature. All of us can be mighty thankful that John Harms enrolled at Chadron State in the first place, that Ross Armstrong encouraged him to remain in the college, and that John has remained a friend of his alma mater for so many years. If he hadn't already given the commencement address 2 times here at Chadron State, I'm sure that he would have been asked to do the honors tonight, because we appreciate so much what John Harms did for Chadron State College in acquiring this building. As I said before, I could go on and talk about the success that Chadron State College seniors or students have had and graduates. The college, of course, doesn't get all the credit for that success because these people came from good homes, they learned how to work, and they were proud to be Americans. But because of the training and encouragement that people like you faculty members gave them and they received from staff members, they have been successful in many, many ways. I just hope and pray that you in the center section here will continue to have that kind of success too. In closing, I need to mention something that is part of my belief system. I have a quote from George Washington who said, "It is impossible to govern a nation without God and the Bible." I'd surely like to hear one of our leaders today say something similar to that. And if I were the king of the universe, which I'm certainly not, but I would have the 10 Commandments displayed in every classroom. What better way could we teach students to be right from wrong? Most of the people who get in trouble and break the law is because they have also broken one of the commandments. And it was Solomon in his book of Proverbs that he wrote some 3,000 years ago who said, "My son, do not forget God's teaching, but let your heart keep his commandments. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding." Some more good advice, I believe. In closing, I hope you've enjoyed this trip down memory lane. May God bless and keep each one of you. Since I'm a reporter and I like nothing better than to write and, as you heard tonight, tell about success stories, I want you, the members of the class of 2014, to know that I will be anxiously awaiting and look forward to writing about your achievements and your adventures. Thank you.